Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with my Week 10 NFL predictions. And we are at Week 10, which means this is the start of the second half of the season. And there has been a lot of surprises in this first half of the season. The Colts and Patriots and the Broncos, they're the top three teams in the AFC. Sam Darnold so far this season, he has picked up right where he left off with the Vikings last season. The Seahawks currently 6-2 on the season. The Panthers are second in the NFC South, as throughout the whole offseason, it was talked about the NFC South is down to the Buccaneers and the Falcons. The Bears have a better record than the Cowboys. Although I'm not completely surprised the Bears have a better record than the Cowboys at this point in the season. I've talked about throughout the early part of the season that as the season goes on, I think the Bears, they will get better. And today was also trade deadline day. And there were a lot of moves made. The biggest move, without a doubt, the Colts trading for Sauce Gardner. The Jets, they were sellers at the trade deadline. They also traded Quinnen Williams to the Cowboys. The Dolphins were anticipated to be sellers at the trade deadline. They got calls for Bradley Chubb and Jalen Waddle. However, they did not trade either one of them. In my opinion, I think the second biggest move that was made at the trade deadline, only behind the Colts trading for Sauce Gardner, was the Saints trading Trevor Penning to the Chargers. The Chargers' offensive line has been decimated with injuries this season. Rashawn Slater, season-ending injury in training camp. It was announced that Joe Alt is getting season-ending surgery. What surprised you the most from the trade deadline? Please leave that in the comment section, as I would like to hear your thoughts. The Week 10 predictions are here. Last week, 7-7, not the best of weeks. Not an ideal week. Those will happen every now and then. I will say a lot of the games were more competitive this week. Last week I had talked about how the average margin of victory was between 18 and 19 points. We had more competitive games this week. That's a good thing to see. And without further ado, let's get to the Week 10 NFL predictions right here on the Johnny Sports Network. As always, we begin with Thursday Night Football, and this week we have the Raiders and the Broncos, an AFC West matchup. And there's a reason why I'm pointing out this is a divisional matchup. I will get to that in a moment. Last week, both teams with an emotional game. The Raiders' emotional loss to the Jaguars at home in overtime. Instead of kicking the extra point to go for the tie, the Raiders went for two. They did not get the 2-point conversion, while the Broncos, they were struggling against the Texans, which I anticipated that was going to be a low-scoring game. But Bo Nix and the Broncos, they found a way to win. I will point out the Broncos' only 2 losses on the season were by game-winning field goals. The majority of this season for the Broncos has been carried by their defense. It honestly is reminding me of the 2015 Broncos a little bit. I said a moment ago there's a reason why I'm bringing up this is a divisional matchup. This is the 7th divisional matchup on Thursday Night Football this season. And in divisional games on Thursday night this season, the underdogs are 5-1 against the spread, 3-3 straight up. Am I saying to pick the Raiders? I'm not saying that. I'm going to pick the Broncos to win this game. However, I do see the Raiders covering in this game. Because with the Broncos being favored by 9.5, you need the Broncos to win by 10. The Broncos only have 2 double-digit wins all season. And I would not be surprised if this went up to 10.5 or even 11.5 by kickoff, because the Raiders, they did trade Jacoby Myers to the Jaguars at the deadline. This feels like a game to me that the Broncos, they win by a score of 24-17. I think the Raiders, they surprisingly stay in this game from start to finish, but the Broncos, they end up winning outright. We have an international game this week. This game in Berlin, Germany on Sunday morning. Falcons and Colts. As mentioned earlier, the Colts, they traded for Sauce Gardner at the trade deadline. The Colts, they are looking to respond after losing to the Steelers on the road in a game where the Colts had 5-6 turnovers in that game. While the Falcons, they are looking to get back on the winning track as well. Falcons have lost 3 games in a row. And for the Falcons to get back on the winning track, without a doubt, they have to get Bijan Robinson going. In the last 3 games, Bijan Robinson has had 35 carries for 111 yards. With this being an international game, a lot of the times the international games are a lot closer than what the public thinks. And I think that's the case once again, because defensively, despite a couple of bad games this season, the Falcons, they're still 4th in total defense. Their defense played great in the second half last week against the Patriots, but they just couldn't generate enough offense. I like the Colts to win this game, but I think the Falcons, they once again cover this week, but still lose. I also should point out the Falcons, they did sign Zane Gonzalez. They released Parker Romo after missing the game-tying extra point last week. I'm going to go with 24-20 Colts. Giants and Bears. In the first game without Cam Scatterboo for the Giants, 34-24 loss to the 49ers. While the Bears, after they started the season 0-2, they've won 5 of their last 6 games. After the first half of the season, it's looking like it's not the same old Bears. Rookie running back Kyle Monangai, 176 rushing yards last week against the Bengals. I do think the Giants, they're in a good position to have success in the future, as this season, unfortunately, Malik Neighbors and Cam Scatterboo are out for the season. I've really been impressed with Jackson Dart this season. However, I've been impressed with the Bears this season as well, even though I've anticipated that. The Bears have been, without a doubt, one of the most improved teams in the NFL. I'm going to predict a high-scoring game in this game. I think this game gets into the 30s. I think this could be a candidate for one of the highest-scoring games of the week. I'm going to go with the Bears to win 37-31. I think it's that high-scoring of a game. We've seen the Giants put up a lot of points against some of the better teams in the league this season. And I think this week can and will be no different. Bills and Dolphins. The Bills with an emotional victory against the Chiefs last week at home. This week they go on the road against a Dolphins team that has had a disappointing season. I'm expecting them to part ways with Mike McDaniel at some point, whether it be at some point this month or even December or after the season. I anticipate they're parting ways with him. The Bills favored by 9.5 points, a significant favorite this week. The Dolphins, an abysmal performance on Thursday Night Football. A 28-6 loss to the Ravens in a game where the Dolphins, they had potential to at least be better than what they were. In the games between the Bills and the Dolphins in Miami, since Josh Allen joined the Bills, Dolphins 21, Bills 17. Bills 37, Dolphins 20. Bills 31, Dolphins 28. Bills 35, Dolphins nothing. Bills 19, Dolphins 21. Bills 21, Dolphins 14. And the most recent game in Miami, Bills 31, Dolphins 10. As much as the Dolphins, they have the extra rest factor, and the Bills had an emotional win against the Chiefs, a rival that's not their rival. We see it in about any sport. A team that has an emotional win, a lot of the times they tend to play flat the next game. I can't see that with the Bills. I think the Bills, they win and cover the 9.5 points. At least at this point in the week, I'd be surprised if the Dolphins made this game close. But I just can't see it right now. I think the Bills, they win pretty significantly. Ravens and Vikings, both teams with a big win last week in what was the return for each of the starting quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson made his return for the Ravens on Thursday night. Dominant win against the Dolphins. And for the Vikings, J.J. McCarthy made his return in a very emotional win on the road against the Lions. And if you tune in to this channel regularly, you know that I like to favor the teams who played on Thursday night or earlier in the week, the next week, because they have the extra rest factor. Both teams, they got season-changing wins in the return of their starting quarterback. But the Vikings win was a lot more emotional, as the Vikings, they were 8-9 point underdogs on the road and winning outright. Meanwhile, for the Ravens defensively, these last couple of weeks, they have been getting better, and that was a big talking point last season, where the Ravens, the defense looks weak, but later on in the season, it got better. I will be honest with you, I can't get a good read right now on this game. I do think the Ravens win, but I don't know if they cover or not. I think the Ravens, they win outright because of the extra rest factor they have. But I will have to get back to you later in the week if they're going to cover in this game or not. Browns and Jets, the game this week where I simply have to pick someone to win. Both teams had their bye week last week. Entering the week, the Jets were favored by 1.5 points. However, after the trade deadline and the Jets' moves at the trade deadline, trading Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, things have now completely flipped, and the Browns are favored by 2.5. I have said before that I can't pick the Jets to win a game until they can show me that they can. And they won against the Bengals. And despite them being 1-7 on the year, the Jets, they're a much better team in my opinion than their record shows. When you look at the Jets season as a whole, they've only really played 2 bad games. Other than that, every other game has been close. That's one of the reasons why I'm picking the Jets to win this game. Another reason, the Browns are 0-4 on the road this season. And if you want to go even further, the Browns have lost 12 consecutive games on the road. Their last win on the road was against the Jaguars in Week 2 last season. If you want to go even further, the Browns have lost 15 out of their last 17 road games. In a game where I have to pick someone to win, I'm going to pick the Jets to win this game in a low-scoring game, 17-14. Patriots and Buccaneers. This is, without a doubt, the best game in the early window. We have the Patriots, who are currently second in the AFC, 7-2 on the season, going against the Buccaneers, 6-2 on the season. The only thing that could have made this matchup better is if this was the Fox game of the week and Tom Brady was on the call commentating for the 2 teams that he played for in his NFL career. The Patriots are currently on a 6-game winning streak, and they are looking like a serious playoff contender. Mike Vrabel, he has really turned this Patriots team around. Drake May, he has shown that he belongs in the NFL. However, the Buccaneers had their bye week last week, so they have had extra time to prepare for this matchup. Despite the injuries the Buccaneers are dealing with, Mike Evans, he's anticipated to be out for an extended amount of time. Jalen McMillan, who was good in the back half of last season, he is yet to play this season. He's still on IR. It's unknown when Chris Godwin will return. But I think with the Buccaneers off the bye week, the Buccaneers, they've shown resilience overcoming injuries on the offensive side of the ball. I think they win this game by at least 3 points. As much as the Patriots have the hot hand right now, winning 6 in a row, I think the Buccaneers, they end that winning streak. Saints and Panthers. The Saints once again losing last week in Tyler Shuck's first NFL start, while the Panthers, a monumental upset on the road in Lambeau. The Panthers so far this season, they have exceeded my expectations quite a bit. I've talked about before the Panthers' ability to be competitive against teams that are contenders. I, however, did say earlier on in the season that I do think the Panthers, they're still about a season or 2 away, but this Panthers team can really compete. The last time I made that kind of statement, they were dominant against the Falcons 30-0. And then the very next week, they lost 42-13 against the Patriots. As much as I have said at points throughout the season, I don't expect much from the Saints. I think this is going to be one of the big surprises of the week. I do think the Panthers, they win this game. However, divisional matchup, a lot of the times divisional matchups, they tend to go the other way than what the majority thinks. I think the Panthers, they are off the emotional victory, the monumental upset on the road in Lambeau. I think the Saints, they cover the 5.5 points. I only see the Panthers winning this game by 3 or 4. I honestly would not be surprised if the Saints ended up winning this game outright, as I would imagine that a lot of people will pick the Panthers in their survivor pools. I still think the Panthers win, but only by 3 or 4 points. Jaguars and Texans, an AFC South matchup. Both teams with emotional games last week. Jaguars, emotional win in overtime against the Raiders. Texans, emotional loss against the Broncos in a game that it looked like the Texans were going to win, but the Broncos, they once again found a way to win. Also in that game, C.J. Stroud left the game with a head injury, and he is currently in concussion protocol. We saw these two teams in Jacksonville in Week 3, where the Jaguars won in a low-scoring game. With the news that C.J. Stroud is in concussion protocol, the Texans are favored by 1.5. I do think that if it is announced C.J. Stroud will play, I think this will go up to 3.5. The Jaguars did trade for Jacoby Myers at the trade deadline. In my opinion, a very underrated wide receiver in the league. Defensively, the Texans are third in the league in third down defense. Right now, I am leaning towards the Jaguars because I don't know if C.J. Stroud is going to play in this game. If he is going to play, then I think the Texans, they win this game. We'll see what kind of news we get the later on that the week goes. Cardinals and Seahawks. The Cardinals finally got back in the win column, ending their 5-game losing streak with a dominant win on the road against the Cowboys. The Seahawks, a dominant win on the road against the Commanders on Sunday night. The Cardinals playing on the road on Monday night, once again going on the road this week to Seattle. A short week for the Cardinals. Jacoby Brissett has been named the starting quarterback for the Cardinals moving forward. And I think that's the right move. Jacoby Brissett, over time throughout his career, he has shown that he's capable of being a starting quarterback in this league. He's pulled off upsets that not many people see coming. One that sticks out to me, Week 1 last season against the Bengals. The Cardinals this season, despite being 3-5 on the year so far, they have competed well in games. 3 weeks in a row at one point in the season, they lost on a game-winning field goal. And one of them includes the Seahawks on Thursday night earlier in the season. They've competed well against the Colts and against the Packers, even though the Packers they've had the tendency of playing down to their competition this season. I am going to take the Seahawks to win this game and win by more than 6 points. I just think the Seahawks, they have been much better since the matchup earlier in the season against the Cardinals. Even though they are shorthanded at wide receiver right now, I like the running game of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Rams and 49ers. There was a comment in the comment section on last week's video talking about how the 49ers are done and I need to quit glazing them. Whatever that means. The latest injury with the 49ers, first round draft pick Michael Williams is out for the season. However, the 49ers, it's anticipated that they could be getting some guys back this week. Starting center Jake Brendel, he could return this week. Starting left guard Ben Parch, he's on track to play this week, as it was possible he could return last week, but they kept him out. It's also a possibility Ricky Pearsall could return for the 49ers this week. If Ricky Pearsall were to come back this week and return to the lineup, without a doubt, a huge boost to the 49ers passing game. As Christian McCaffrey has been the main source of the 49ers offense as of late. That's been the case for almost his entire time with the 49ers, but these last few games in particular. George Kittle returned to the lineup a couple weeks ago. And there are people that really get annoyed when I pick the 49ers, but I'm going to pick the 49ers to win this game. Especially if they're able to get these guys to return to the lineup this week. Plus, there has been some conversation about Matthew Stafford for MVP, and what I've noticed this season is, at least as of late, when there's conversation for someone to be league MVP, they tend to lose the next game, and I'm going to stick with that trend. I think the 49ers pull off the upset. Lions and Commanders. The Lions looking to respond after being upset on the road by the Vikings at home as a significant favorite. This week, the Lions are once again favored significantly. 8.5 points. Another one of those teams this week that's favored by more than a touchdown. They're on the road against a Commanders team that has been absolutely just disappointing this season, and a big part of that is injuries. Jaden Daniels once again injured. He injured his hand on Sunday Night Football. Head coach Dan Quinn, he did take accountability for that, saying that it was his fault for keeping him out there in the game when the game was already out of hand. Terry McLaurin also did not play in that game against the Seahawks last week. This week we have the Broncos, Colts, Bills, Seahawks, Lions, all favored by more than 6 points. And of those 5 teams, I think at least 2 of them aren't going to cover this week. And I already have the Broncos and Colts not covering this week. I haven't made a selection yet for Bills, Dolphins, and Cardinals and Seahawks yet. As some behind the scenes information, I don't record these in order. I think the Lions respond. I think they take advantage of the Commanders being riddled with injuries all season long, and they win by double digits. Dan Campbell is going to have this Lions team locked in and ready to go for this matchup after an underwhelming performance last week. I don't see the Lions underperforming 2 weeks in a row. And this is also, even though there's a lot of injuries to the Commanders this season, the same Commanders team that ended their season last year. So a lot more emotion in that matchup. Sunday night football, Steelers and Chargers. The Steelers with, despite what the scoreboard shows, a dominant win against the Colts. The Colts, the high-octane offense. The Steelers forcing 5-6 turnovers in that game. And the Steelers defense, they showed that they are what I've been saying they have been for the last several years. That they're a defense that can look like a top 5 defense in the league one week, but then the next week, a complete liability. Throughout most of the season, the Steelers defense has been a complete liability. They've given up more than 30 points in half their games this season. The Steelers are currently 30th in total defense. While the Chargers, Justin Herbert is second in the NFL in passing yards. They traded for offensive tackle Trevor Penning. Joe Alt, he is getting season-ending surgery. And I'm surprised the Chargers, they did not end up with a big-name running back, as that is what I was anticipating for the last couple of weeks leading up to the trade deadline. As the Chargers, they are wanting and needing to get back to their identity of football under Jim Harbaugh. And maybe they did try to acquire a big-name running back, but the teams just said no. There are reports that Breece Hall was receiving calls. The Jets were receiving calls for Breece Hall. But I think this week we will see the Steelers' defense be a complete liability this week, as I think that the Chargers offensive, I think they'll have their way with this inconsistent Steelers defense. I think the worst case scenario is the Chargers win an offensive type of game where it is 34-30, as I have the Chargers winning by a touchdown. Week 10 concludes with Monday Night Football, and this week for Monday night, Eagles and Packers. The Eagles had their bye week last week, while the Packers, they're looking to respond after losing at home against the Panthers. The Packers once again playing down to their competition, as that has been a trend for the Packers this season. Since they started 2-0 on the season, they lost outright to the Browns, didn't cover in that game, didn't cover against the Cowboys, didn't cover against the Bengals, didn't cover against the Cardinals, dominant second half on the road against the Steelers, and lost outright, didn't cover against the Panthers. The Packers have only covered one time since week 2. And to be honest, it doesn't matter to me that this matchup is in Lambeau. I am surprised the Packers are favored in this game. It's been announced that Tucker Kraft is out for the season, as Tucker Kraft has been a very big piece of the Packers offense this season. The big talking point going into the season, once the Packers traded for Micah Parsons, there were discussions on, was Micah Parsons the one player the Packers needed to make a run at the Super Bowl? Watching them throughout this season, the answer is no. They still have a lot of work to do. Matt LaFleur, honestly, he's holding Jordan Love and the Packers offense back. And if you ask me, despite this being a home game for the Packers, I think the Eagles, they should be the 2.5 point favorites. Last season, the Eagles were struggling going to their bye week. But then after their bye week, we saw a completely different Eagles team. They won all but one game after that. And it was against the Commanders where Jalen Hurts left the game early with a concussion. This season, the Eagles entered their bye week on a 2-game winning streak. And there was a reason why I was saying not to panic about the Eagles when they lost to the Giants. And at the trade deadline, Howie Roseman did what Howie Roseman does. He acquired Jair Alexander, Jalen Phillips, and Michael Carter II. And all the Eagles gave up was John Mechie III, a 3rd-rounder, a 6th-rounder for April's draft, and a 6th-rounder for next year's draft. I am going with the Eagles to win this game, as I think that the Eagles after their bye week this season is going to be very similar to the Eagles after their bye week last season. And that will do it for my Week 10 NFL predictions. Comment your predictions down below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. My main 7 picks for college football were uploaded yesterday. Best of the rest for college football will be uploaded either Wednesday or Thursday. My takeaways from college football and the NFL this past week will be on YouTube Shorts later in the week. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the games this weekend. And until next time, Vegas is always watching.